Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Eddie Proudfoot Podcast. Today, we're going to have a interview conversation with my good friend from the Shakespeare play, Macbeth. Hi, Macbeth. How are you doing?
I'm good. I had a moment there where I thought about doing a Scottish accent, but it wasn't on the tip of my tongue.
You could have committed and then dropped it halfway through.
I gotta practice it a little bit more before I start
Yeah, that brings
pulling
up
it
a
out a
great
little bit
question.
more.
Would you recommend doing an accent to a first-time player, or would you say hold off, maybe?
Ooh, that is a hard question to lead in with.
We don't have to answer it right now. We can come back to something else.
I'm happy to answer that because I think it's a very resounding it depends.
That's fair.
I don't think there's any reason not to do one if you're really excited to do an accent. There's also zero reason to do one if it scares you a little bit.
True. That's very good. That's a good answer. I like that. I think the only thing I would add is do it if you're comfortable enough to do it for a long period of time consistently.
Or not.
Fair, you know?
Like I often don't speak in my or I'll narrate what my character is doing of um like my current character Peter instead of speaking as Peter of like I don't think that this is a good idea. I'll say Peter says he doesn't think that's a good idea.
That's fair too. Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely like speaking in your character's voice or just narrating is totally acceptable thing to switch between. I mean,
Yeah.
I do that too sometimes, especially like with my character in the same campaign, Nico. I do the voice half the time, and then half the time I'll just say what he does because I don't feel like doing the voice.
And it is a tricky accent that you chose, like somewhere between Australian and New Zealander.
Yeah, and then also like mixing in Boston for some reason. I just wanted him to have a funny sounding voice, and I was just thinking of like some accents that I enjoy, and then mashing them together and seeing how it would sound. And it's it's a trip, man. That's what it is.
It's a trip. Yeah, proud tradition of fantasy.
Yes. Speaking of fantasy, tell me about your first RPG experience. What system was it, and what was the campaign like?
So the very first time, there's almost two answers to this. So I was so excited about D&D when I found out what it was when I was like 11 or 12, and I got a couple books and I made some characters. And I think I had like D&D for Dummies, and I had some of those basic characters, and I just made myself like a little battle map, and I would just play like the mechanics of it and have like fights between characters or like have the characters like fighting some orcs or kobolds just like on my own. First time I played D&D with other people, my first character, I don't remember his name, but he was a rogue, and I actually don't recommend a rogue for people's first character.
Interesting. Why is that?
So my first and second characters were rogues. I think I only got to play, well, each of them only came out like once or twice. But you have this idea of a rogue going into a D&D game. If you haven't like played it enough, you want to be uh, stealing things and tricking people, but you're probably starting at level 1 or level 2. You're going to be okay at tricking and stealing people. And the D&D or the person running the game, the DM, will support you through that process of trickery or thieving if it's relevant to the plot and it's
Right.
not super overt. It's solving a problem. Um, if you just walk into the bar and the DM at the very least just wants you to like chat with some people and like get the vibe, and you just start trying to pick everybody's pockets, think of what would happen in real life. Everybody in the bar is going to clock you and you're going to have a really bad time. You're gonna get dead or end up with a bloody eye and thrown out in the street, and that's not a fun experience for your first uh, D&D session.
That's a very good take. I like that. But Macbeth, you're forgetting a very key and small detail. But you're a rogue, so no one's gonna catch you.
Oh, but they will.
I mean, of course, yeah. Nothing
they
always
they
goes in
will.
favor.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, you're at any level, you're rolling a die.
Yeah,
You can be high level, like 14th to 20th level rogue with like plus 12s to all of these checks, you can still get a 1.
That's true. And if you get a
Or
1,
you're in an open room and 20 people see you, one of them is going to get a nat 20.
not guaranteed, but yeah, very likely at that point.
No, that's true. Not guaranteed. Not guaranteed. What would the math on that be?
Let's not figure that out right
Let's not figure that out.
We'll figure it out
Decent
later.
odds. Decent odds. And if you're going through the whole town and you're fleecing people and then you end up with like hundreds of witnesses, someone's gonna see something. Like you gotta be a smart rogue. You gotta be subtle. Subtle in the gameplay, not just subtle in the mechanics.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess one thing you could say if someone does choose to play a rogue as their first character, then simmer down a little bit on the stealing and thieving side of things and just play it cool. Do the classic brooding cool kid in the corner not talking to anyone play of a rogue.
Totally. Be George Clooney and Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11.
Yeah. Or Aragorn in the first Lord of the Rings movie, just chilling in the bar, not talking to anyone.
Yeah. Great way to play a rogue.
Yeah.
Or ranger. I mean, he was a ranger.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing at the end of the day.
Kind
I mean, they're not, but... Okay. So tell me more about your first experience with RPGs, specifically 3.5, and how you liked that system.
Okay, 3.5. I really liked the crunchiness of it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd been even at like 12 and 13, if I'd had a little more access to more books, I probably would have gone down a whole bunch of theory crafting rabbit holes on all of the multi-classing you could have done for 3.5.
Right, because it's a lot more in-depth in what you can actually get.
A lot more in-depth, yeah. So I'm not actually speaking from experience here anymore, but from what I understand about 3.5, if you didn't multi-class, you were playing a suboptimal character.
That's what I've heard too. I've also never played the game, but I have heard that if you didn't multi-class, it's not going to be as good as it could be.
Yeah. Although, we're kind of aiming this podcast at people who are newer to D&D or kind of looking at D&D, so I should hasten to add that you do not have to play an optimized dir.
Yes, that's a good point.
Like that's totally fine. I know we were going to talk about DMing, so I'll make this about my players. In the campaign that I'm currently running, all of the people that I'm playing with, all my characters are new players.
Right.
Brand new. Brand new to role-playing. And I wouldn't call any of them optimized.
Right.
But they've all kind of gone different directions, and they can all do cool things. And I think at least 5th edition is very good at that.
Yeah.
Whatever direction you go, there's a cool thing you can do.
Well, 5th edition was kind of like, and now we're off topic, but this has been great, so we'll just keep going with it. But like 3.5 was really great because you said it had all that crunch, which was like the slang for just super dense amount of rules and material that you can exploit and make great things with. Then they made 4, which was supposed to be like really streamlined and very much plug and play, but it removed all that nuance. And then 5th came along and was kind of like the hybrid of the two, where you had all that sort of intricacy that you had from 3.5, but you had all the streamlinedness that you got from 4th edition, where things just kind of clicked into place and you didn't need to do like hours upon hours of reading for things to make sense.
I think that something that 5th does really well, or let me back that up a couple steps. In 3.5, there were so many like splat books, other books that were going off different directions.
Right.
Extra material that weren't necessarily super checked for game balance. So I think 0.5 was a potentially very unbalanced game. I remember hearing about, I should look this up actually to see if this is actually a thing, but like competitions to see who could create the most broken characters.
Right.
And there was something about like he had a name. It was like Nib Nub the Goblin or something. There was something that the Goblin as a playable race in 3.5 gave you that you could use it to like create an unstoppable character at first level. Like somehow you ended up with like 3 wish rings or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You just effectively just break the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, first level, and you can win any encounter out of the DMG.
But that's like the most like egg nerdy, super well crafted character. Like no one would actually ever think to play that in a campaign. Like if you just picked a random D&D player writ large, they're not going to make that character basically.
Exactly. Yeah. There was also things you could do in 3.5. Another great one that I read was somebody multi-classing solely so they could max out their swim speed or like their swim skill. So they swam up a waterfall.
That's interesting.
And that was just like what they built their character to do. And so the DM was just like described a waterfall in a cave for flavor, and the player was like, I have been waiting for this, and they swam up to the top. And I think the GM was just like impressed that they were like, yeah, there's a +3 sword at the top.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah,
like,
you built it for this. Here's your reward.
Yeah, that was cool.
And then that DM never put a waterfall in anywhere ever again.
Oh, that would be sad. I would just start putting in waterfalls everywhere.
I would too. No, that's like a DM punishing the players for creativity, which is not a good idea.
Yeah, but I might stop putting +3 swords on the top because now I know what's going to happen.
That's fair. Maybe like just like 20.
What's at the top of that waterfall? Oh, it's, I don't know, the Deus Ex Machina you've been waiting for, or oh, it's a troll and he throws you off.
That's true. Just start putting like a bunch of waterfalls, and then some have really good treasure, and then some have fights at the top of them. Or some guy just waiting to like punch you back down into the water below.
The cavern of waterfalls of many things.
Oh man, that seems like a dungeon waiting to be made right there.
I think we have our next one shot.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great one shot. No, we said we weren't going to talk about DMing stuff, so I'll cut that there.
Right,
I want to ask
playing.
you.
Okay, very, very first time I played a rogue. We got through one fight. My friend's older sister very kindly ran a game for us. And I remember being a little bit disappointed at how like normal my rogue was. I thought like, oh, I'm just going to play rogue and I'm going to like just wreck everything. It's going to be the best. You do have to wrap your head around the fact that you don't start as Sir Lancelot.
Yeah.
You start as, and I mean, you don't want to. Like, you want the journey from the kitchen boy to the squire, who then defeats a dragon, and you get knighted and take over a castle, and people start calling you Sir Lancelot.
Exactly. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination, right? And that's like kind of the classic thing with D&D.
Yeah, and that was one of the I started to learn that lesson in that first session.
Yeah, but how old were you at the time? Like you said, you were 13 or so.
I think I was like 12. I don't think 11 or 12.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I know I didn't start till much later when you accidentally texted me about Warhammer.
When I accidentally invited you, and it was one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because now here I am still playing RPGs. So one thing I did want to ask you, because I want to talk about different systems. We talked about 3.5 and the crunchiness of that and the rogue character that you played and the lessons you learned as a kid. But I wanted to ask, because eventually you got into Warhammer, and I know we could start talking about tabletop minis in here too, because I know you also did that when you were a kid, but keeping that aside, how long were you in 3.5 until you eventually found Warhammer, or were there systems in between that?
That's a great question. Probably like 2 or 3 sessions of 3.5 and a little bit of like theory crafting on my own time.
Right.
And then had a really short campaign of 4th edition and played maybe like 5 sessions of that one.
Right.
And a mutual friend of ours somehow stumbled across a book for Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, Waffrup, I think they call it for short. and he picked up the second edition of that. And I'm actually going to crack open a window because I can't remember when that came out.
Yeah, I was looking this up a while back. I know 4th edition came out in 2018 because we played it right soon after it came out.
Yeah, we were super excited when 4th came out.
Yeah, 4th is, I mean, that's a whole like series of podcasts in and of itself, is 2nd and 4th edition Warhammer. So we won't dive into any of the differences between those, but they're a lot of fun.
Okay, so 2nd came out in 2005.
Okay.
That was the version that we ended up playing, and that was in like 2011. So I guess it wasn't actually that old.
No, that's fairly new. And then I think I looked this up once when we were playing 4th edition. I was wondering like what happened to 3rd edition, but apparently 3rd edition wasn't very popular.
No, I think 3rd edition they went a different direction, and it was more of a board game than a role-playing game.
Yeah, and then 4th edition was like basically, it's almost like the direct sequel to 2nd edition. When you're playing them, that's how it feels, at least to me.
Yes, yeah, very much in the same way that I think 5th edition D&D is more of a successor to 3.5 than it is a successor to 4th.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, also people would say the same thing about how Pathfinder kind of fills that void too, because how 4th edition
Also
is so
true.
much different than 3.5.
Yeah, and how 3.5 to Pathfinder, I never picked up Pathfinder, but the way I understood it, it was like almost, or it was like very, very close to 3.5. Like it would have been very easy to convert from one system to the other.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Again, I haven't looked into too much Pathfinder. I never got into a campaign with it, but it sounds really fun, and I've heard people describe it as D&D 3.75, just because it's so close to 3.5.
Yeah, I've also heard that one. Oh, just an interesting point about 3.5 into other systems. I don't know if other people had this experience. For me and the people I was playing with, 3.5 was like everything we'd been reading it. So even just beyond the books, talking to other people and looking at that theory crafting and how the game worked, like we've very much had certain concepts in our mind. One of them being the 5-foot step was a thing in 3.5 you could do of if you only moved one square being 5 feet, then you did not provoke attacks of opportunity.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, which is no longer a thing in 5th. And was never a thing in Warhammer, but it was something that I still played with for a long, long time.
Yeah, I remember us doing that in that 2nd edition of Warhammer campaign, doing the 5-foot step.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone in that group, except for me, had played 3.5 prior to playing Warhammer 2nd edition.
Yeah.
Or at least Pathfinder, maybe.
It's kind of a nice house rule.
It's not bad. I think in 5th edition, I wouldn't put it in just because it kind of messes with the combat mechanics a little bit too much.
Yeah, and 5th also has lots of opportunities to not provoke attacks of opportunity while moving short distances.
Yeah, exactly.
So you would take away the value of those mechanics.
Yeah, that's a really, again, we're both DMing campaigns right now, so we keep going back to rules and things that are more DM related, but that is very much a DM concern of like, okay, if I'm going to change the rules, how is it going to impact the other rules and like the different builds that characters can make when they're theory crafting what character they want to have? Like, if I do this, is that going to make it so their characters just like their whole gimmick is now just completely lame?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to bring this back to playing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, playing. Yeah.
And
because you were playing in that Warhammer 2nd edition campaign before you started DMing, and there was an occurrence that happened where the current DM had to step down for a little bit, and then you took over. But when you were playing, what did you start as?
So I started as a smuggler, and I think this is a really, really nice thing about the Warhammer system. You're not a character class. You go through different careers as a character, and the different careers give you acts, or in shoot, I forget exactly how 2nd goes now and how it bridges into 4th.
They didn't have, because in 4th they had the upgrades, right? Like you had your 4 steps of your career that you'd go through, but I think in 2nd it was like whenever you upgraded, there was just different upgrades you could buy to your different characteristics, which were like your abilities.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and then you could buy more talents.
Similar idea. So it became more nuanced in fourth. But yeah, in second, you were just a career, and you being that career gave you access to different abilities. So I was a smuggler, and that was really, really fun because I had some access to like a little bit of like talking and negotiating and like conning abilities, and some abilities around navigating and managing a boat. And then in so skills in Warhammer aren't that combat focused, which also makes it really fun. And it as you're going through the rules and going through your character, you really start to get the sense of, oh, I am not a unstoppable juggernaut of a warrior. I'm a dude, or I'm a gal, and I was a gal, incidentally.
Oh right, I remember that character now.
Yes, I forget her last name. I got to look it up again. Maglin was her first name.
Yeah, Maglin, that's right.
Yeah.
No, because she became an NPC once you started being the DM for that campaign.
Yeah, which was extremely fun. That was a satisfying. Fun because I got to make the arc for my PC just happen. And yeah. Sorry, that's a little bit aside.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. I think one thing
playing the character, right? I just wanted to kind of come back to that earlier point of, you don't start off as unstoppable. You have to go through the arc, and having those first couple had a couple experiences in 3.5 where it would kind of hit home as like, oh, this didn't go so well playing as this really loose cannon. And then in fourth, got to play a wizard, and it was like, oh, I'm like buffing the team and finishing off the people that others are damaging. This is humming along a lot better. And then hit that in second, went through the mechanics. Oh, I'm just a woman with a boat trying to make a living in a really dangerous world. And then early on in that campaign, my character was in a tree to get a better vantage point for archery, and got shot through the eye and fell out of the tree and nearly died. Water break.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, it sounds like you need some water. You got shot out of a tree and nearly died. Now you
shot out of a tree, nearly died, had an eye patch for the rest of the campaign.
That's character.
And that's character. Like we were before our podcasting, we were talking about minis.
Yeah.
And man, that's a mini I would want, not to play with, just to be on my desk.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And so as a new player, don't take that failure as a bad thing. Like I could have like stormed out and been mad at the DM.
Oh yeah,
for hurting my character and throwing it at us. That was too hard. But part of it was just the friends that I was with. Like the DM was the dice decide.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes role-playing fun. It wasn't the DM deciding that my character got sniped out of a tree. It was the DM going, oh, this encounter is looking a lot harder than I thought it would. But this is what's happening. We just got to keep going with it. And this is how the dice landed.
Right.
And then to the DM's credit too, there might have been like a little bit of fudging to allow like our whole party got wrecked. There was one of us still standing and dragged the rest of us to safety and just like lit the whole forest on fire to just get us out of there.
I imagine some fate must have been used in that scenario.
Some fate was most certainly used. For anyone not familiar with the Warhammer system, you get a non-renewable or semi-renewable resource of a fate point. If you're about to die, you can fate point and either escape the situation or avoid that damage.
Yeah, without going into it further, that's perfect.
Yeah, I think cool.
Yeah. No, like we could probably do like a whole 10 minutes on how fate works in 2nd or 4th edition.
Totally, yeah. And like a whole podcast on philosophy around how much fate do you give your players.
Oh yeah, in 4th edition, the whole
Yeah.
balancing of how much fate to give, because there's the other
Yeah.
mechanic that they introduce in there, resilience. Which
And
off topic, but that's a good topic though.
if I can keep rambling, the only other
Please.
thing I'd kind of add to that, trying to give out some like hard and fast tips. Don't take it personally. If things go bad, take it as a really good thing. Own that experience, and then take the cues of encounters as kind of knowing what's coming down the line. So that was like I think that was our first big fight in the Warhammer system.
Right.
And it made all of us kind of go, oh, this is not kitty gloves. Like, our characters could die. Our characters are going to be scarred. We got to be focused when we go into combat. We can't start fights just for the fun of it, or someone's going to lose a hand.
Yeah, no, Warhammer is very unforgiving with permanent scars, wounds, and injuries like that.
Yeah. And then conversely, if you're playing 5th edition and your DM is someone who wants to play the rogue who gets into shenanigans and you steamroll through every fight that you're in, I mean, that's open license to start stealing the town from underneath its inhabitants.
I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, then go for it. Then you're in a different kind of campaign.
Yeah. I think you touched on a really interesting and important point there with the not taking it personally if something bad happens to your character. I know, speaking from experience as someone who's very okay with their character dying, I know
you are a paragon of not taking it personally.
I mean, not to like rub salt in any wounds, but I remember my very first character died when I wasn't even at the session.
I retconned it.
But like, I think that kind of built the basis for, these are characters, their lives are in danger all the time. They're going to die, and you need to just be okay with making a new character and enjoying the process. Like, you were talking a lot about theory crafting earlier, which is the idea of just making characters and seeing what you can build. And that's half the fun of doing any of these RPG systems, is seeing what you can come up with and then having them ready to go.
It's so much fun. Yeah. And then one-shots are so much fun because you get to try out that like semi-broken character you've been playing around with in your head.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely the value of a good one-shot. And I mean, even just having them in the queue for when your characters pass on or retire. Like, that's another thing that we didn't mention, but you can retire characters kind of like what you did with Maglin, right? Maglin retired when you became a DM.
Yes.
And then she wasn't gone, but she was still around in the game, and you can do that in any system.
Still around. Actually, another player in that campaign also retired a character somewhat early on.
Oh, yes. I think that was before I even joined. I think that was...
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I forget the name of that character, though.
Yeah, so do I.
The only other character's name I remember from that one off the top of my head is... Oh, no, sorry, I remember two. I remember Carl and Esteban.
Right. Esteban replaced the retired character, and then Carl. Oh, Carl.
Yeah. Oh, Carl. Carl, that kills people.
Well, I mean, you can cut this out in post if you want to, but we've kind of alluded to Carl, so this was I'll try to tie it to playing more than DMing. But
I see where you're going. Please continue.
The fun story about Carl is that he was an evil character.
Yes.
In the campaign, and you got to be careful when you play evil characters that you don't wake up evil, talk to everyone evil, go to bed evil. Carl thought he was a good person.
Yes.
And had very strong religious beliefs based on where he was from in the campaign, and wanted to bring about the end of the world. But that was a good thing to Carl, and he wasn't going out preaching to everyone, oh, the world should end, because he was in an area that did not share those beliefs and was very, very much opposed to Carl's own people. They would have killed him for that.
Yeah, and I mean, without getting into it, but Warhammer has this whole dynamic of different empires and regimes that are existing there. So it already has this different structure kind of going on that would kind of bring about that sort of narrative, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yeah. And so the way that playing that evil character worked was that I would say two ways. The first one was nobody else in the party, or sorry, first one was that Carl's player did all of his sort of evil things that would have unsettled the party aside from main gameplay.
Yes, I can attest to the hours that we spent where you and the player would go off into the room while you as the DM were talking, and then the rest of us are sitting on the couch just like shooting the stuff around, and just talking and everything. And we're like, what's going on there? Like, we don't know. It's just a side conversation. And I think like that's an interesting point, like from a DM perspective of how to like do that so the players aren't aware. But I think like the result that we didn't know anything of any of Carl's business going on at the time. Like I thought he was good. I thought he was on my side, and like he liked us as party members, so he treated us well, and none of us knew he was evil or even his big secret at the end until it happened.
No, well, and then he wasn't the only. At least I don't think he was the only party member at the end to sort of like go off into the sunset, because when little things would come up in the story of like, we nearly died, we didn't have the strength to save these people, what do you think about life, existence in the universe, he would kind of get in there with a sly little, oh well, I kind of think this, we got to look out for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We got to take drastic measures to be strong enough to protect the people we want to protect.
Yeah.
to varying degrees of success. I think one of the I think the other character that you mentioned, Esteban, went along with that.
Oh yeah, Esteban was full-fledged evil by the end.
Yeah, so exactly, yeah. Started off good, met Carl. Carl convinced him to go along with him. Yeah.
I'm sure if Eddie was there at the end, he would have also gone along with everything that Carl did, but he died, and he died thinking Carl was a good person.
Yeah.
Because Eddie was just a humble baker.
Poor Eddie, a baker swept up in goings on beyond him.
That's a story for another time, though.
Story for another time, yeah.
But yeah, no, I really liked the arc that Carl had. I thought, as a DM and someone who DMs now but didn't at the time, I really understand the struggle of having to like balance a side thing with one character and the whole party. So I think like the way you handle it was definitely like well done.
It's just like that's good to hear. I'm very glad to hear that.
From a player's perspective, though, I think one of the things I try to do now as a DM, because I remember like sitting in those sessions where you're like sitting sometimes, I think we almost sat for like sometimes 45 minutes because there was a lot of in-depth stuff going on. I always try to do that with characters outside of session now, but like especially when we were doing it, it was like we'd be RPing for an hour, something would happen, and then Carl would need to go take his aside. So like I don't know how you do that in those scenarios unless you just cut a session short. But at the time we were doing like 6-hour sessions.
So, yeah, that's true.
Like we don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
like
I mean, those sessions were also such fun sessions because we were so distracted.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah,
those were great times.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I'll kind of throw this one over to you. So as a new player, obviously that was a challenge of like having that aside time. Do you think you would have attempted the evil character, and do you think you could have handled it at that point in your role-playing experience?
So that was my first ever campaign, the one we're talking about, and at the time, like I was thinking about this a couple months ago, like I don't actually know what Eddie's alignment was. I think Eddie was probably neutral good or neutral because I was so new to the game. I didn't really understand like the concepts of like alignment, and like now looking back on it, people talk about alignment so much, but I think alignment at the end of the day is just a way to nicely describe your character's moral philosophy as well as how they feel about society, which is how it's defined in D&D. But really, like that doesn't have any like mechanical meaning. It's just about how you're going to RP. So like you could almost remove all discussion of alignment and then just have players play how they want to play, and you'll still have like evil characters, good characters, neutral characters, chaotic characters, that sort of stuff, and just kind of falls out. And I think based on the way I played Eddie, he was probably like neutral, because Eddie was just kind of like out for himself after being with the party for a little bit. Like once he got over the whole being an indentured servant kind of thing, he was just kind of like out to survive at that point. Sorry, I cut you off though.
No, that's fine. I think I started talking before you were done. Oh, I was gonna say for my current, or actually, for no character I have ever played have I settled on an alignment or like used that to guide my character.
I think that's a good decision.
The alignment chart is there, and that's totally fine to use. Maglin, I just thought about what she wanted out of the world, and she, I kind of came up with a backstory for her of, she had a hard life, but she was smart and just wanted to get out of it and wanted riches and security above everything else. And she ended up with that plus some power, but it was the
that sounds a lot like
kind of above all. So ambition was her whole raison d'etre.
Right. Yeah, that's like chaotic neutral then, because chaotic neutral, like in the 5th edition descriptor, it's like the only thing you really care about is like your personal freedom. So like if you want like financial security and stuff like that's caring about like your personal freedom in a certain sense. But no, I totally agree with everything you said. And like just back to the original question, do I think I could have played the evil character like Carl did? My answer would probably be no, because I would not have like, especially at the time, like I think it was like 15 or 16 when we started playing, and like I wouldn't have had like the like full philosophical depth to go into thinking about like, okay, what are my moral foundations as this character, and kind of like give it that sort of character analysis of like where I'd be at. And I think the idea of playing an evil character, especially the way Carl did it, I still look at that as like one of like the gold standards for playing an evil character, because like you said earlier, Carl thought he was doing good. And I think that's one of those pinnacles when you're playing an evil character. You have to be able to empathize with the villain's perspective and play them like a villain would be played, right? Like not have this idea in the back of your head like, oh, my villain's a bad guy. You want to think your character's good, even if your character's evil. I think that's part of the RP.
Yeah, I think so. And I know from conversations with Carl's player that he did really look for the philosophy that Carl had.
Yes.
And wasn't looking at an alignment chart, but was like reading books on philosophy.
Yeah, I honestly like definitely not needed for first time players to like dive into philosophy, but if you're into reading about like old philosophies like Greek philosophy and like other old philosophical texts, like it does help you kind of like orient yourself in that space of like, is my character good? Is my character evil? Like, where are they?
Yeah. And I mean, in our friend group being so, especially at that time, so interested in playing around with philosophy, that kind of made it an extra fun game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think there's like those two hobbies really, like philosophy and history, really help you bring things in D&D to life. Because I found like as soon as I started DMing, it's like knowing terms for like old timey weapons and different like castle structures, nobility structures. Those things really helps like kind of just give it that extra level of animation. So like having that like background knowledge from like reading fantasy or even just old history texts.
Speaking of history, do you mind if I go on a mini side rant?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so studded leather is a thing in D&D.
Okay.
I think it's the best non-magical armor you can get.
Yeah, it's the best light armor. Yeah, that's right.
The best light armor, yeah. It was never a thing. People think it was a thing based on pictures of brigandine armor in which metal plates were riveted to cloth. So you had cloth or sometimes leather outer as like your weatherproofing of your armor, but you had overlapping metal plates underneath.
Right.
And that was the actual armor, not the studs on the clothing. Those were the rivets.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
So studded leather armor is burgundy armor. It would be like between medium and heavy.
That's so funny. I didn't know that. That's interesting that D&D just added that. I mean, thinking like to things like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, like I feel like I can't pinpoint a scene or a character that was wearing it, but I feel like I've seen people wearing things that were like inspired by studded leather. You know what I mean? Or am I just completely
Totally.
out to lunch here?
No, that's 100% a thing because that's much cheaper to make for a production.
Oh yeah, true. I guess like I'm trying to think what value studded leather would add. I guess like if you're thinking about like how you'd be hit with a sword, like I guess it would prevent against slashing, cutting the leather, maybe a little bit.
Only if it hit the stud. So
Yeah.
you would need your studs so close together. Yeah, but then there'd be so many gaps in the studs because it's on fabric and not overlapping. So at that point, just wear mail.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which
Oh, man.
kudos to Lord of the Rings. There's a great suit up scene with Aragorn putting on his mail hauberk, and it's good armor. Good on him.
It's good armor. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add here before we wrap it up?
So much.
I mean, we can always do it again sometime, like with a different
That's
topic. But I
true.
think we've covered a lot of good things here.
Start playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start playing. Make mistakes. Be nice to your friends.
Yeah. That's number one. Be nice to your friends.
Like if you or just the people that you're playing with, like if you like the people that you're playing with, you can't really go wrong. You're gonna find the way you want to do things.
Yeah.
And it might be a hijinks, shenanigans, stealing everything from the innkeeper kind of campaign, or it might be a very straightforward, we're the good guys, we're saving the world, or it might be a complex philosophical statement. And yeah, you're gonna figure that out.
I think that's good advice and a good spot to end it. So thank you so much, MacBeth, for making the time today. And I'm sure we'll talk again sometime
My
soon.
absolute pleasure.
All right. Well, you take care now.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of the Eddie Proudfoot Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.